Hey everybody, welcome back to this channel, or if you're new here, welcome for the first time. My name is Adrian Field and I'm an expat entrepreneur that currently lives in Lisbon. And wow, it has been such a long time since I made a video and I've really missed this process, but at the same time, I haven't felt like I've had much to say. There hasn't been so much going on, but we're coming up now basically at the 1 year anniversary that I have been living in Lisbon, that it's been almost a full year of fully living this new experience. And so today I wanted to make this video to talk about what it's been like living here in Lisbon now for the past year, if I'm still happy here, if I regret leaving Bali, where I was living for the previous 4 years before moving here, and all of the differences and kind of all of the highs and lows of that experience. So if you're new to this channel, as I said, my name is Adrian Field. I'm an expat entrepreneur. I've lived all over the world. I've lived in New York, Los Angeles, Mexico, France, India, Nepal, Thailand, Bali. And I think that I've always kind of been searching for what was going to be a place that I could really feel at home. And maybe I did feel at home in all of those places for a certain amount of time. One of my lights just went out, but we're going to ignore that. So maybe I did feel at home in those places for a certain amount of time, but that I was kind of always evolving. And I always had this desire really to live in Europe ever since I was a high school student in France. I felt like I belong in Europe. But with my business, it wasn't really financially possible and feasible, even probably visa-wise, until maybe in the last several years. And that's why I chose to live in countries where the cost of living was much less expensive than in the United States, like Mexico, Thailand, and Indonesia. But getting to a certain point now in my early 30s, the reason that I left Bali really had a lot to do with social life and romantic issues. I'm a single gay man, as I was back then as well, and I felt like if I stayed in Bali, I was probably going to die alone. I really didn't have much of a social life in Bali. In the 4 years that I lived there, I would say that I made like one really good friend who, is actually now consequently my business partner in Bali. But I just wasn't finding the kind of people in Bali that I could make a community with, and even less so for, having a significant relationship. So that was really the main catalyst of why I started to feel unhappy in Bali. Now, meanwhile, I had ostensibly a really great life in Bali. I lived in a big villa, a 3 bedroom, 3 bathroom villa with a pool, and I had staff. I had a really comfortable life, and all I did basically in Bali was play tennis and go to the gym. So really I was living like a retiree at 32 years old. And again, for some people that's the dream, but for me it just felt like, what am I supposed to do with my life? Is this just going to be like this kind of monotony for who knows how long, and like that nothing is ever really going to happen? And I didn't feel like I was growing as a person. I didn't feel fulfilled. And so, this again was the kind of main motivation for me leaving. But then something else happened when I was living in Bali, which is that the last time that I went to renew my Kitas, which is my residency visa, I got pulled into an interrogation that lasted for 6 hours. And it also made me realize how unstable my life was there, that, really at any moment the rug could be pulled out from under me, because Indonesia is not a country that necessarily has like very firm rules about anything. It's just if they don't like you, they could decide to kick you out more or less for whatever reason. And so I felt like, with that in mind, it really didn't feel like a place that I was going to be able to settle. And even furthermore, you could live your whole life in Indonesia and you're not going to really ever be fully integrated. Like, I recognize that as a Western person, that I really didn't fit into that culture. So again, why Portugal? Why did I move here? Well, again, I wanted to be in Europe. My main interest at the time when I kind of started this was that I wanted to live in Spain, and I consulted an immigration lawyer for what the process would be like, but it was a bit involved. Like, I would have needed a police report from every country I had lived in the last 5 years, and I knew for America that was going to be a challenge because I hadn't been in America in a long time. And then there was more money that was required as well to be put into a bank account to show, financial solvency. So it could have been possible, but it just would have been more hoops. And I had been hearing a lot of things about Portugal, that it was a cool place and that the visa was easier. So that's why I came here originally in November of 2022. I stayed for 3 months. I really liked it. I found an apartment. I did all the steps I needed to do, then went back to Bali, where I was a resident of Indonesia, to actually apply for the residency visa, and came back here in May of 23 and have just been living here full time in my apartment since then. So wow, I mean, yeah, it was a long process obviously to get here, and I have to say that the process is still not 100% finished. I'm like 99% finished because I am still waiting after all of this time to receive my physical residency card. And this is something that is abnormal because I had my, it's called, your immigration appointment. Back then it was called CEF. Now they've changed the name to AIMA, I think. But I had this all the way back in July, and that was over 6 months ago. And normally it should not take more than 3 months to receive your residency card. But there are all of these issues that have been going on immigration-wise in Portugal, where they changed the name basically of this immigration office, as I said, and for some reason that caused like such an overhaul. But even worse, or inexplicably so, they process the D8, which is the digital nomad visa, slower than the D7, which is the retirement visa. Obviously, I didn't know this at the time. I don't think anybody did, because when the D8 visa came out last year, I was like one of the first people to be even applying for it. So again, I don't understand why this has taken so long. I was told 6 weeks ago that my process was approved and now it's just waiting to be printed and sent to me. But I want to point out that this, I feel, is kind of typical of how things work in Portugal, which is to say that sometimes they move inexplicably slowly for no reason. The bureaucracy can be quite annoying. It's not impossible, but it's more just frustrating. For example, one of the things that I needed was to get an NISS, which is your National Social Security number. And the process to do that was first to email to request to get one. Okay, easy enough, right? But then a month or so later, they responded, okay, your number is ready, but you need to go pick it up in the Loja da Cidadão, which is like a kind of an office where they have all of these different things that you might need to access as a resident. So I had to call and make an appointment for maybe 2 months in advance or something to go to this place. Just then to go there and pick up a number. Like, how is this? I mean, come on, guys. I'm sure you can think of a better way to do that. Like, if you can email me that the number is ready, can't you just send me something in the mail or an email? Like, this is not a secret number. So it was very strange that that needed to be done. And then there was just a lot of numbers. I needed a NIF number, an NISS, your health ID number, which is a good thing. Like, I'm really glad that as a resident I have access to this public health system, but just a lot of paperwork and a lot of like having to wrangle things. And so it's just, it's a very intensive process. Like, I get messages from people who are just starting down this journey, and I always tell them, like, be patient. It's really a long haul because I started this in November of 2022 and I'm not exactly at the finish line yet. I mean, I am like just a few steps. I feel like any possible day my doorbell should be ringing and there should be the CTT mailman that has my residency card. And you know what? It hasn't even stopped me. I was able to go on vacation in Italy 2 weeks ago. As long as I'm staying within the Schengen zone, it doesn't really matter. But, it is kind of annoying. I run an international business. If I needed to go to Bali or if I needed to go to Nepal where I manufacture, it would cause, a headache for me not to actually have this physical card. So I find this very frustrating, but there's nothing that I can do about it. So that's the thing. Portugal, you have to be patient. I thought that Indonesia in a sense was bad, but at least in Indonesia, I had people that, were handling these things for me. And it always felt like if you just pay a little bit more money, you can get something done. Like, that it was a very flexible, fluid kind of system. And here you're just hitting your head against a wall. I mean, it takes the time that it takes. I also want to talk about some of just the general good things that I've experienced about living here in Portugal and why I'm ultimately very happy with my decision to have left Bali and moved here. So I would say that the number one thing is the social element that was lacking for me in Bali, but that is much better for me here, that I find amongst the very vibrant and diverse expat community here, I'm able to make friends. I've made good friends within the last year, far more than I would have ever made in Bali, and that I had made in 4 years living there. I made more in 1 year here. as a gay man as well, it's much better for me being in Lisbon. I feel that there's a lot going on. There's always parties, and there's, many more people to meet and interact with and potentially date than there were in Bali. So again, being that that was my main motivation of why I wanted to leave Bali, I can say that I am really happy with how all of that is going here. I also feel like I'm really maturing more living here and developing more adult life skills than I did in Bali, because in Bali, everything was taken care of for me. I had a housekeeper who came to my house 6 days a week, who would even make my coffee in the morning, who I didn't have to run errands. I did next to nothing except for go to the gym and play tennis and get massages. Again, sounds amazing, but as a young person, I don't think that this is necessarily a great way to be living. So here, for example, I've learned to cook. I had never cooked in my life, and when I moved here, it kind of became a bit of a necessity because, one, I don't like Portuguese food very much. It's just really basic and bland. And two, getting takeout for every meal like I used to do in Bali is prohibitively expensive here, and the food isn't even that good. So, for example, I was really missing Asian food, and that was kind of what got me into cooking, is that I said I'm going to start learning how to make some of these dishes that I really miss and that I can't find here. So that started me down that journey, and then I got really into making Italian food and just experimenting. It's kind of something now that I really enjoy, and I end up now cooking 3 meals a day for myself and going grocery shopping every single day, which frankly takes up a lot of time. It's almost a full-time job just taking care of myself and my home, because I don't have anybody to do that for me anymore. And I don't mind it. I feel that, again, like I'm developing certain skills that are important to have in life, and that, down the line in the future, for the kind of life that I want to construct for myself, I think that these are really nice things to be able to offer in a relationship, etc. So I'm happy that I've developed in this way, whereas, in Bali, I was kind of like too cosseted, and that I was not growing as a person. I have to say that some of the other things I really like about living in Lisbon that I've found have been like a very happy choice about moving here as opposed to other European cities are things like the weather is pretty much great all year round. We're in winter time now, but it's in the like mid 60s Fahrenheit, which is like low 20s Celsius. And coming from Italy, where I was 2 weeks ago, where it was literally freezing, it was below freezing in Milano. I'm really happy to be back here where like it's quite nice, and the sun is usually shining, and in the summertime, you have the beach. So this is like a happy kind of, how to say, like I'm just happy that I ended up here as opposed to maybe Spain, where, for example, in the summertime in Madrid, it's extremely hot. You don't have the beach. So these are really, nice attributes about Lisbon. And furthermore, what I realized being in Italy for a bit was, again, like how livable Lisbon is because of its size, that it's a small city, so it's so easy to get around, and things like Uber or the other ride sharing app called Bolt are extremely cheap. It costs 12 euros or something to go to the airport from where I live, whereas in Milano, it's 110 euro fixed fee and a taxi to the airport. So it's just so much easier. You don't even have to think about taking an Uber or a Bolt when you want to go out to a party or whatever the case is. And I found that that was the opposite in Italy. Like I wasn't going out to party in Rome or in Milano because like a taxi was going to be so expensive, and that it's not an easy kind of thing. Like there was a night that I couldn't even get a taxi in Milano. Like there was literally none available on the apps. So I find that, life here is really convenient and easy. So those are really positive things about living here. You won't believe this, but my door buzzer just rang, and I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed right now that that could actually even be the CCT man delivering my residency card. If it is, I would love to be able to capture this moment on camera, because I would be like genuinely so excited and happy, but we're gonna see. I don't know, I've always ordered stuff online, so it could be anything.
How are you, Adrian?
Oh, not my stuff though?
No, just this.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay. All right, guys, disappointing. I got some package of something that I ordered. I don't know when, but it's not my CEF. It's not my residency card. Anyway, so let's talk about some of the bad things about living here. As I already talked about bureaucracy, the fact that yet again today my residency card has not arrived and it's been over 6 months. And there's just no rhyme or reason to these kinds of things. Like some people get their residency card in a month, and I've been waiting over 6 months. And it's not because I've done anything wrong. It's just because this process is so random, and it's up to whatever bureaucrat, that your paperwork lands on, and whether or not they feel like being productive. So that's something that is quite maddening about this place. I already went into it, so we don't need to talk too much more about it. The only other complaint that I really have about living in Portugal is that I'm still having trouble with dating, but specifically with Portuguese men. I like to say that they're a bit like a mirage, because they look great and then you get close to them and then they kind of like disappear and you realize that there was nothing ever really there. I don't fully understand it yet. I think that there's a lot of maybe cultural aspects that go into this, but I find that the Portuguese men are reserved, and they don't really make any effort. That, for example, if I start being interested in a Portuguese guy, that I need to chase them, and even when I chase them, they're like not very available. And this is in contrast to, let's say, Brazilians or Italians, or people who are much more like open. So that's been quite frustrating for me, that there have been several Portuguese men that I've been attracted to, that I've met, and then like nothing ever happens. And I've kind of now decided in the last week or so that I'm going to make a new rule for myself, which is that I'm not even going to bother trying to date Portuguese men or meet Portuguese men, because I know that it will lead nowhere. So at least though there are enough men here, like expats from other places, whether they're Brazilian or whatever, that one can meet, and still the scene here for gay people is far better than it was in Bali. So I can't fully complain. It's just that maybe if I were in Spain or Italy, places where I feel men are more open, like maybe something would have happened for me by now. But this is one of my main frustrations, and just things that I'm continuing to, I don't know, trying to figure out, what exactly is the situation. But at this point, I don't think it's my fault, because I've had enough experiences with non-Portuguese men to know that like it can't all be with me. So, that's really what it comes down to. I think, as I said, overall, I'm quite happy here. I'm just happy with my life. Like, yes, it is more labor intensive for myself. When something goes wrong, I need to figure it out myself. There's not an easy person just to call and pay a very small amount of money to fix something. But with all that said, generally, I'm much happier. I'm happier to be in Europe. I'm happier to be in a culture where I do feel like I belong, where the expats don't necessarily live just in like a hermetic bubble amongst themselves, and that there's this like very obvious divide between expats and locals, where in Bali, the locals are often like in a kind of like a servitude type of role. This is on my mind because there's a new show that just came out with Nicole Kidman called The Expats, or The Expatriates, I think, which is based on a book, and this takes place in Hong Kong, and it kind of goes into a little bit of this, cultural divide between the expats and the locals. So again, like here, there's not such a strong, divide. And I think this is a much better way to live in general, when you feel like you're integrated with the place, with the people, community, etc. So that's it for this video. That's my life update. Keep your fingers crossed for me that I do get my residency card in the next few days, mostly just because this is quite an annoying thing when it's not in my control. But, if you're going down this path and you want to move to Portugal, you're going to have to realize as well that there's so many variables and things that might drive you crazy, and you just have to be patient. So thank you guys for watching this video. Until the next time, take care, and I'll see you later.